Hello everyone and welcome to Cappuccino with HR. My name is Rudi Bauer, and after 40 years in business, I'm 100% sure that the success of companies is directly related to the passion of the people working for these companies. With the Cappuccino of HR, we created a format where we really invite people. It's HR leaders, it's recruiters, it's talent acquisition guys, and we're talking about all the different kind of topics. And the range is going from AI, of course, to new work, to leadership, and all the challenges along the way. Yeah, hello and welcome to a new episode of Cappuccino with HR. Today I'm really delighted to have Gina Schinkel with me. So hi, Gina.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. And I think I probably can announce that if people want to see you live on stage, I think we have you at our HR Leader Summit in Berlin in July. So I'm really delighted as well that you are being with us, really sharing your experience, your knowledge, and your thoughts with the audience over there. And today we are talking about a topic which I really love the most, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's hidden in the name somewhere. If we're talking about HR, I mean, one part of the HR is humans. And the topic we're discussing today is how could we build workplaces around humans? I mean, at the end of the day, we are all spending our lifetimes. And I did a rough calculation many years ago. I think it's between 20 and 25% of our entire lifetime we're spending in the jobs. Honestly, I personally have sometimes the impression that we still work like in the last centuries. I think nothing has changed. I think the work models that are in place in many companies are still coming from the Industrial Revolution. But we will come to that in a minute. The first thing which I have to ask you is probably to introduce yourself in a few sentences for the audience not knowing you. So that's probably the first thing what I would ask you to do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Rudi. It's an absolute pleasure. So my name is Gina Schinkel. I'm the founder of Driftawave, which is a travel company providing turnkey travel experiences for remote first, digital first, decentralized, how you'd like to call it today, companies, teams, and communities. And how did it actually start? Well, basically, I defied the traditional career path years ago because I wanted to go and explore the world. Then during the pandemic, I ended up making a career at LinkedIn Talent Solutions, where I got completely obsessed about all things technology, trends in the future of work, and basically probably was on top of data and trends in the most exciting times HR has seen over a long period. And yeah, truly have seen the role of HR change over that time as well. We'll probably dive into that a little bit deeper down the line, but that's a long story short. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the second thing which I need to ask you, as it's called Cappuccino with HR, what is your favorite coffee?
Oh, a weirdo on this one. So it'd be an oat cappuccino with honey and chocolate sprinkles.
Okay, sounds tasty. Sounds tasty. I mean, you mentioned it already. The role of HR has changed dramatically over the years. What do you see as the most massive changes probably, and how good is HR or our companies in accepting this change? Because change needs to be accepted as well. So, what is your take on this?
Ooh, I absolutely love that HR has finally got a seat at the C-suite. And obviously, we go back a little bit further in time. It more so had to do with payroll, who's going to be attending the office at which time for whichever particular role. And obviously, over the recent years, there has been a lot of digitalization taking place. So the skill set has completely changed and still continues to change. But also, a lot more human-centric, listen to the people. How can we enable them? What makes them thrive? and also, yeah, what do they need to succeed? Because that looks completely different now from, let's say, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, even more. Yeah, so
Mm.
a lot.
And how good do you think are companies in accepting that change or implementing the changes?
Whew, I think it depends a lot. I could definitely say, for example, companies like in the very traditional industries like manufacturing, automotive, they are they're getting back on track over recent years, I could tell, very much with digitalization part. But obviously, if you look at who are the absolute pace setters, I would say in IT, internet and technology, because obviously they work in those programs, they make those programs and systems, they understand the value and efficiency that it can bring. And you can also see they are the ones that are absolutely consistently innovating in the new times that we have arrived in, because yeah, the ways of working have completely changed.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you look back on, I mean, most of the companies, and I'm in business now for 40 years as well myself, and I think in most of the companies, if I really look on what has changed, I mean, there was this kind of pandemic where we then definitely were forced to rethink the whole thing a little bit, and I think all the technical excuses, all the excuses that mainly were technical, it doesn't work because we don't have access to data. I mean, this is gone now. I think many companies have adapted to that, and I think it's honestly, I can work from everywhere, and the only thing what I really need is probably my smartphone, because I have access to all the data which are relevant, to all the information which I need. At a minimum with my smartphone, and I mean with a tablet it works even better, and with a laptop it works nearly perfect if you have Wi-Fi somewhere. But now we definitely see the trend that a lot of companies are trying to bring all the people back to the offices, to get back into the normal 9 to 5 mode. What is your explanation for this kind of reverse trend? Let's call it reverse trend.
Ooh. I think it can be an excuse. But it can also be depending on different factors, based on what works best for the company. They're all trying to, I guess, reinvent themselves. There are some leaders that are really hoping to press the 2018 button and return to the old. And yeah, that's not going to happen.
Is it still, do you think it's still missing trust that some people in organizations think or believe that people, if they work from abroad, if they work from home, that they're probably watching Netflix series instead of doing their work? Or what is the reason for this kind of, or is it, I mean, there's something positive as well. I mean, when we were full remote, and now we have switched back a little bit in a kind of a midterm solution ourselves, as we say, okay, we definitely see a benefit of having people in the office and having collaboration and having this quick exchange of information by just drinking a cup of coffee during the day, talking about a topic which probably could be solved in a minute, instead of having remote meetings which you have to plan and schedule. So, but what is this kind of? I think some companies for me seem to be really stubborn in a way that they really don't want to leave this kind of 9 to 5 track and path, because it worked pretty well for many years or decades. And now we have this kind of modern, and I mean, your company is really dealing with this kind of stuff. I mean, you're delivering solutions which could where geographical location doesn't even make a difference, because I think that it's solving everything what you need if you want to go on vacation. I mean,
I think you say that very right. What I hear very often is just easier to tap someone on the shoulder. It's how we've always done that. I really love, I'm going to quote him again, Ethan Evans, who's ex-VP from Amazon. And he's right, we've done this office thing for so many years. However, in the future of work, I can see a lot more opportunity for innovation in terms of remote work and technology. Definitely, if I can quote another one of my friends, he's a community strategist, and basically he forecasted the remote work trend when he was watching Back to the Future. When he got fired through the laptop by his employer, and he was studying international business at the time, Ilke Akancel, and it just clicked. And he says it very beautifully that in general, with remote, you can connect with people over any belief or value or given passion. And obviously he made his full-time job out of online communities or community building in general, and it's become such a phenomenal place for knowledge sharing, for solving challenges, for finding people that are on the same vibe line as you, so to say. Versus back in the days, you would be born in a certain place, you'll meet certain type of people, you could go to the, let's say, football club, you go to your church, and those are the people that you interact with. So right now we entered a complete different era, and what, for example, we see is that there's a lot of smaller companies that will start out remote, and now that is their new way of working. They have completely adapted to it. And basically, I think Zillow calls it out very beautifully. They call it the cloud HQ. So if you can make sure that all this important information is captured in one central location, you don't have to go over to your colleague and tap in for that information, because it's all in one space, which will also allow quicker, smoother onboarding. Also looking at times of AI, where we're headed, what can we automate, what should be specifically done by humans. So it's a whole different way of operating. You can also see that the office almost has become, if people go to the office, it has become a place of meeting very intentionally, whether that's in the office, whether that's in an offsite, bringing your team together. Dropbox is a great example. I believe they hosted 250 offsites throughout the past year. They have a full dedicated team who is responsible for this. Um, and yeah, it's proven success. They're looking for better ways of operating. And there are different companies who are redesigning the office space based on the different needs that the people have at different times. So a lot more, yeah. I guess in modern times, it matters more than ever why you're doing things, what you're then doing, and how you're doing things, especially because times are changing at such rapid speed. I remember when I was still working at LinkedIn last year, they forecasted that the skill set would have been changed by 65% by 2030. And they actually updated that. When I got an update sheet from my colleague, they updated it to 70%. And if you compare that to the same amount of change happened in over a period of 100 years, and now actually happens just in a time frame of a few years. So it is really hard to captivate everything. So yeah, I guess I would advise more companies to jump on the digital train because it's moving fast. Yeah.
Do you think there's a benefit, in a personal opinion, do you think there's a benefit in it for smaller companies to grab better talents? Because I mean, if you give this kind of freedom, I mean, you automatically get a kind of a larger area where you can hire people from, because I mean there's no geographical borders honestly then for some jobs. Do you think it's a kind of a new chance for smaller, especially smaller brands and companies to get better talents?
100%. Yeah. It just goes global. It goes viral. To give an example, I dropped a post on LinkedIn 2 weeks ago, um, with loads of references to people within the remote industry that I've connected with that share very, very valuable resources when it comes down to remote jobs, remote companies hiring. And it just blew up viral. It's got over 1,000 likes, over 100 shares. And this is one post, but this has been happening consistently over recent years. It's such a great opportunity for companies to tap into talent beyond the local place of where they are, and also creating that exposure. Actually, even this morning, I got the most amazing remote data email dropped in my inbox. I always follow the Flex Index. They share a lot of data, and yeah, from researchers that are fully into the topic, and speaking with all of these remote companies consistently. There's this company, and basically they've close to they've reduced their headquarters to nearly half the size, and give their employees the flexibility to work from where they perform best, whether it's in the office, whether it's from home. And basically, their amount of applicants quadrupled. It quadrupled, and they ended up hiring 5% more women. Also something you hear a lot more out there. I think very great point for IT talent. Also, if you look at the sales background where I come from, it's always more challenging to find women in that field. So a great way to attract them. Different needs there, yeah.
And if companies, I think a lot of companies are not doing it because they don't want to do it. I think they're probably afraid of setting it up right and getting the right structure. What does it mean? Let's start at the top of an organization. What does this kind of new work approach? I mean, either it's remote or full remote or workation, which is probably one step further. What does it mean for leadership? Because I mean it's more difficult, or it's totally different, probably not more difficult, but totally different to lead teams that are full remote than having teams sitting in an office, being there from 9 to 5. What do you think is the biggest kind of mindset shift which needs to happen in the heads of leaders?
Oh, I think much more EQ focused. I think it will move much more towards a coaching role over a managing role. I guess in the industrial times, you're teaching what you know and make sure everything runs smooth, right? Which still in principle works. But given the speed of things changing, it becomes a lot more important to guide people. And also, I guess because we're in such times of overload, find out what truly matters, where your time is spent best, and then also find out what brings out the burning passion inside of someone, right? So that they feel enabled, they feel empowered, but they also have the opportunity to provide their best work. And yeah, it's in general already midline managers have not been supported that well, especially if it's their first time managing role. So for example, with these remote companies or mostly flexible approach companies, they're also focusing a lot more on equipping their leadership with EQ skills, especially in the times of AI again. Yeah.
And if companies come to you, for example, and ask for some kind of support in implementing this, what do you think is the first 3 steps that are needed to get it right? Because what I sometimes see, I mean, if you have a team, I mean, we're now coming from a kind of an approach which a one fits all, because if you have a nice office and you have 9 to 5, I mean, this is a kind of a one fits all strategy, more or less. Yeah. You have the office, all the people are coming there, they have the same coffee, the same kind of fruit basket, the same kind of benefits in the office environment. And now we're coming to a point where probably it becomes an extremely individual approach for every single employee that you have in the organization. Because, I mean, if I have a family, probably vacation doesn't work for me anyhow, because if my kids are going to school, I mean, vacation doesn't make any sense for me. Because even if I would like to go to Tahiti and work from there for 3 weeks, it probably wouldn't work because of my family situation. Then you have got young people in the organization that probably like to work from Asia for 2 months and then come back again. How do you handle that? I mean, this becomes a kind of a really complex system then, because you have individual needs and you have this kind of fairness thingy, which you always have to have in mind as well, because it sounds quite unfair if colleague A is allowed to do it and colleague B is not allowed to do it and colleague C can't because of his family situation. What are the challenges there? Because it is like totally three-dimensional complex. For me, it seems to be three-dimensional complex and sometimes quite unfair. What's
Children remain a choice, but
yeah.
no, yeah, very good point. I think it's important to have an open conversation with your employees, um, understanding how you function best. I think inclusion becomes something that's much more central place, right? From having a hybrid remote team, even just having a Zoom call, are some in person, are some remote. Make sure that that person also feels heard. They're also in the cloud room, so to say. Um, but also when it comes down to work from another country policies, make sure that everything is aligned throughout the whole organization. Some decide it's the same for everybody. Within some organizations, they have decided that it's completely decentralized depending on the team's needs, the type of role that they have. I think sometimes in case of HR, it also depends how hard or how easy can be to attract the talent, right? Or sometimes they're not even located in your specific region. So yeah, I think it really, really depends. The conversation has become increasingly more important. Open communication about it. Um, I think many companies are still trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. Even looking back at our time at LinkedIn, we were able to work remote from another country where our passport allowed us for a time 6 months per year maximum. Now they reduced it to 5 with more restrictions. But that meant I could go all over Europe. For example, my colleague who's from the UK after the Brexit does not legally, officially have that flexibility in that way. Or our colleague who's coming from Mexico, and then this person can actually go to Mexico to work remote from there. So yeah, in the ideal situation, if you ask me, we find a global solution for that as well. I have actually been looking for ways to overcome those challenges, even speaking with people who actually advise countries, their local tourism boards, on how they can actually attract these remote or digital workers. And basically, there's too much hassle going on to set up something for someone visiting, let's say for a month. Is just as easy for them to basically visit on a tourist visa. So that's why many of these, there's even differences. There's like digital nomad visas, and there's like remote professional visas, so to say. And they're often focused on attracting people for longer periods of time. So even there as well is a difference as well. Another thing that is becoming increasingly more important. What about the freelancers? Because right now a lot of people are potentially employed or potentially self-employed. But let's say Reid Hoffman, actually the founder of LinkedIn, he forecasted that within this decennium, half of the workforce in the USA then will be freelancing or involved in the gig economy. And how are you going to make sure that those people will thrive in your organization? How are you going to make sure that they feel like they belong and they're an inclusive environment? How do you make sure that these people that have the opportunity to look into different kitchens, so to say, also benefit your company's goals at the end of the day?
But how good do you think? How good are companies in having done their homeworks? I mean, pandemic really forced us into the direction of digitalization, but I think if you want to implement work models like this and support the kind of trends going on out there in the market, I think one of the homeworks that definitely needs to be done is having a kind of a, let's call it paperless office, all the information available somewhere on some servers and clouds, because otherwise it's impossible. Because if you have to forward every single piece of information as a scanned PDF to the people abroad, it probably gets a little bit weird. And what is your personal kind of impression on how good are companies in Europe if it comes to that?
I think the smaller companies, startups, scale-ups that have been founded over recent years are normally very digital focused. I mean, we have amazing tools today like a Notion, a Coda, where we can have the guidelines, automations. It can even be leveraged as a marketing tool in terms of employer branding. Some companies share them publicly. I think for organizations that technically have been forced to go remote during the pandemic, all of a sudden it requires a complete new way of working. Potentially documentation is not something that's done in a day. I think those are also generally, many of them are being called back to the office, especially when companies grow bigger in size. So it's more common for companies up to max, let's say 200, 250 employees to be remote or more flexible. Because at some point, the larger the company, the harder it becomes to steer and align and make sure everybody's engaged. There are actually some of my friends, Carl and Emily, they've built this tool called Resocialize to find out if they can make the office space in a virtual place more inclusive. For example, they take very high pride in including more women into the workforce, provide the opportunity to also make a career, but also people who come from or desire to move to more rural areas. Even there's a project going on, Remote Work Europe. In general, it's a big problem. For years, the youth has been told, go and study, go to the city. They adapt to their new life. That's then where the jobs are. And is that then where your life is going to be? The rent is super high. Pollution is another thing, another whole different topic is So there's so many opportunities and positive outcomes, but it doesn't mean that remote always is the easiest way forward.
Yeah, and I mean, I think probably remote as itself as a kind of a alone standing thing is probably not even the solution. But that is my last question as well. Anyhow, nearly at the end. I mean, this half an hour was passing by so quickly. So and then the topic is so broad that we probably can talk for another couple of hours. But I want to ask you one final question. If you would describe, as we were talking about, a kind of a human-centric workplace, if you have to describe a human-centric workplace with 3 words or probably 2 sentences, how would you personally describe it for yourself? And it could be definitely meant for yourself. What means human-centric workplace for yourself?
I think a place where people have the opportunity to thrive on both personal and professional levels, being enabled, but also have control, have authority over the work that they do, where they do it, and when they do it, because work no longer is a place. Work can be done anywhere. And that was not 2 words.
No, but I think it was a really nice description. I think you were putting everything together, which from my point of view is necessary. And I think we definitely, companies out there should definitely, if they haven't started rethinking it, I think we should definitely start rethinking it, because honestly, that's my personal take, is that I think at the end of the day, the deal that companies having with people becomes more and more unfair, because at the end of the day, we are living in a kind of a society where we're not delivering labor work as employees. We are delivering, or we're giving our lifetime, our creativity, our passion, and our ideas and thoughts and knowledge. And at the end of the day, the only thing what we get from companies is, at the end of the day, it's unchanged since hundreds of years or thousands of years. It's money. And for me, this anyhow is a kind of a dirty deal in the meantime, yeah, because getting money for giving you my thoughts, my creativity, my lifetime, my passion sounds for me anyhow in a way a little bit unfair, because it's a kind of a really rational commercial deal. And I think companies should try to probably add something more to it to make the deal a little bit fairer. And this is probably trust and freedom and appreciation. And everything what you described in your more than 2 words or 2 sentences, but I mean, everything was in it. I think it was definitely exactly that message. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned compensation, because over recent years you could really tell that mission-driven leadership has become increasingly more important. Companies that are sustainable, doing sustainable practices, or outlining that this is something of an important value for them, the applicants would fly in. It was great. Actually, I really loved seeing that. What we now see, this is interesting as well, given recent times with the layoffs, people get a little bit restless.
Of course.
The D2 Collective, which is a community in tech, they recently launched the State of Tech report. And something that talent is now valuing a lot is actual career growth, which makes sense. And I see it with my friends from Dublin as well, because they have this perspective, okay, I'm going to be growing my career and this is where I'm going to be. But with layoffs, less movement, less roles, they're being stagnated. So yeah.
I think in times of crisis, job security is always an issue, and a kind of career path and a kind of a planability of my personal situation in a couple of years ahead from now on. I think that definitely is always becoming important. I mean, I had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crises in my career, so in this last couple of and it was always the same before. The high flight time is a kind of the arrogance phase, where either the candidates or the companies become extremely arrogant in treating the other ones. Yeah, so that happened as well. And now we are back on earth. I think now we are really grounded, and I think, but that's the best. I think that's the best ground to grow again. And now I think it's a good point for companies also to use this kind of grounding time frame for really rethink what they will will do after the crisis, and every crisis has an end as well. So from that point of view, I think now it's a really good time to really sit down, put all the heads together and say, okay, how do we want to go into the future together? And I think it's the best time to start now, because it definitely could make sense at the end of every crisis, and every crisis had an end. Yeah, so this one and that we are in now at the moment will definitely have an end as well. Gina, it was a pleasure having you with me. I really enjoyed this session. I hope the audience will do the same with listening to it. As we already mentioned at the very beginning, there's a really chance to see you live on our stage, and I'm really looking forward to have you in Berlin with us. So, and yeah, so it was great fun for me, and thank you very much for being with us, sharing your thoughts, your ideas, and your expertise with me and the audience. And dear audience out there, stay tuned for the next episode, which is coming up quickly. So, Gina, thank you so much for being with us. Goodbye.
So much. See you soon.
Thank you for watching Cappuccino with HR. If you enjoy this kind of conversations, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Then you get all this kind of upfront information, your upcoming episodes, and all my nice guests. Cappuccino with HR is brought to you by WeAreDevelopers, Europe's #1 developer community and a leading platform for connecting HR and companies together with developers. If you want to learn more, visit us on WeAreDevelopers.com. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time on Cappuccino with HR.